What is up, everyone? The weekend ranked is almost here. A big balance patch came. I am TST's the Mudman, and let's talk about what we should play this weekend for Gods Unchained. Before we talk about any God popularity, let's jump into the most important nerfed cards from this most recent balance patch. Starting with Guild Enforcer, this card used to be in every single deck. It wasn't the biggest nerf of all time. The card's definitely still above average, but you will not be running into this card every single game anymore, so that's definitely worth thinking about. The next big nerfed card is Einir the Frozen King. This card used to be crazy. Last week, if your opponent's board was empty, Einir would deal whatever the strongest creature strength is directly to your opponent's face, whereas now if your opponent's board is empty, Einir does that same damage directly to himself. So now he sort of punishes you for fully clearing your opponent's board, which is way worse than before. Probably not going to be seeing any Ymir the Frozen Kings, and if you do, it's probably going to be weak, and that'll be great for you. The last card of the big nerfs is Mooncray Cyclops. Used to be a 3/3 that got +1/+1 every turn, and if you were frenzied, +2/+2. So it used to snowball out of control. Now it's just a 4/4 that gets +1/+1 if you're frenzied. It doesn't grow if you're not frenzied. Similar to the Guild Enforcer. Card's still decent, not as crazy good as it was before. Probably doesn't fit into every single nature deck like before. Altogether, Nature and War definitely got a pretty decent hit with these powerful cards getting nerfed, and then, Guild Enforcer used to be in every single deck. Now he's probably only going to be in control-y ones. So that is good to know. Let's jump into the popular gods of this week. I've got it set to Mythic rank for the past 3 days. Since the balance patch was 3 days ago, anything before that is no longer relevant. So we can see Nature makes up about 28% of the meta at Mythic rank, then War at 23%, then Death, Magic, Deception, and finally Light at the bottom. This is a bit strange because usually I would say, like, oh, Nature and War are the most popular. That makes sense. They're the best gods. But this week, I'm not particularly bullish on either Nature or War. I've still got Nature and War decks planned out to show you guys, so don't worry if you're big Nature and War fans. I still got a deck to show everybody. But I don't know if Nature and War are the two top-tier gods this week. Why don't we jump into a deck that is most definitely top-tier in Board Wipe Death. Hey everybody, sorry for the interruption. I just want to remind everybody that all of the decks that we discuss, their deck codes will be in the description. That is low-key the best part of these videos, is all the deck codes. You don't need to do anything. Just open the description, copy and paste, they're all there. Just want to remind everybody and enjoy the rest of the video. Okay, so Board Wipe Death is definitely an archetype we've got to talk about. Last week, 2 different players got perfect weekend runs, 25 out of 25 with the exact same Board Wipe Death deck, and this is it. The player who came in first currently still has a 100% win rate with it at 19 games. The list overall has had almost 1,600 games played with a very nice 69% win rate, so this deck is definitely a heavy hitter. It's also important to note that this deck went 25 out of 25 twice last week, and none of these cards were nerfed. So this deck was great last week, and it's going to be great again this week. It's just a very strong, stally control deck with an egregiously greedy top end. You've got all of your powerful sleep stuff with your Siren of the Graves, accompanied with your Canopic Hoarder in order to get more sleep effects. Your Ava can sort of single-handedly beat Zooey creature spam decks. You've got your Fanatic to ramp up into your high mana slots. Fleshbind heals for a ton. Just a Nibble heals for a ton. You've got tons and tons of card draw to make sure you get to your good stuff on time with your Sulfuric Range, your Burrowing Scarabs, your V-Rocks. And then for your win conditions, obviously you've got Neferu, same as all other death decks. But you got your 9-mana Polyhymnia, which hits the board, usually wins the game. And if Poly's not good enough, this deck has a Packer's Monster, which has stats equal to all of the stats in your Void. And if it gets destroyed, you can bring it back indefinitely with Neferu's Khopesh. And this deck is incredibly strong. 2 people got perfect weekend runs with it last week. So if you like grindy, control-y, slow games, and you have the collection to make this deck, this is definitely a great decision. But if you are a fan of death but not board wipe death, we've got zombie death. We've talked about this archetype every week so far in this What to Play over the weekend ranked series, and this archetype got buffed yet again. It has a new addition to the deck in Mark of Death. This used to be a 3-mana card, and now it's 2 mana. Its effect is Bless. Give each of your creatures afterlife summon a 1/1 zombie. So it's very easy for you to build a big wide board. Now you can give everything on your board afterlife, which just guarantees it sticks around. So you can guarantee that your super powerful win condition cards like Neferu's Will or Nether Swarm Lord always sticks. You may have noticed that this deck does run things like Nether Swarm Lord, Demonic Offering, and Chickens, which is different than the old, the old zombie archetypes we've been talking about, and that's mainly because of Mark of Death. So you no longer need your Cursed Obelisk or your Necroceptor to be your sole zombie generators. Now you can just sort of play a normal zoo game, fill up the board naturally, play your Mark of Death, and then that guarantees your Nether Swarm Lord is crazy, your Neferu's Will is crazy. This deck is really fun. It's I guess it can be a bit difficult to play, considering like aggressive Zooey decks tend to like to spill their entire hands, where this deck doesn't really do that. You just sort of want to get your zombie generators and your Cursed Obelisk and your Necroceptor, play both of those, and then just always have 3 slots open on your side of the board to just fill with zombies and be real conservative with your resources. If your opponent can deal with your Necroceptor and your Cursed Obelisk, then you can throw your Decaying Rhinos or your something else to have them deal with that. We got Fickle Cambion in here. Fickle Cambion's crazy. Your Soulburn God Power increases its attack, and all of your zombies increase its health. And you make lots and lots and lots of zombies. So this thing gets out of control really quickly. It usually comes down and is immediately a 3/4 or a 4/3, which is very decent stats for a 3-mana creature, and it just goes up, up, up from there. Let's see, we've got Neferu in here, just in case you lose the board and you want to, just rely on Neferu to win. Strangely enough, with all the games I've played with this deck, Neferu has been the weakest card. So if you really want to add a second Neferu's Will or some other, like maybe relic removal, you can actually think about removing Neferu because you just don't need her. You have really great board presence. You never get below 15 health unless you want to. So Neferu is sort of unnecessary. That sounds weird to say because she's probably the best card in all of Death, but what are you going to do? Yeah, so that's about everything. Okay, I guess one more important note. You never want to play 2 Cursed Obelisks at one time. Even if you think it'd be cool, you could fill your whole board up for 6 creatures every single turn. 1 Cursed Obelisk is enough. Eventually your opponent will deal with your Cursed Obelisk, and you'll be really happy you saved the second one. So you really don't ever want 2 Cursed Obelisks on the board at one time. It's just too strong. You don't need to be doing all that much. So, that is it for the zombie death. If you want some more in-depth analysis of zombies in general, we talk about them every single week, so check out some of the previous What to Play over the weekend videos. And now let's jump into some Zoolight. Okay, the Zoolight list that I'd like to talk about this week was made by the Sam Bam. It's a fairly normal Zoolight list. I think Zoolight is really strong in the meta right now. The more they nerf aggressive nature in war, the stronger Light becomes. Light really likes to be the strongest early game board presence deck, and it's really, really good against board wipe death. You have lots of great creature buffs to win the game before 7 mana. You have lots of anti-sleep things built in with your ward creatures, as well as your Radiant Dawn, which is a big AoE buff plus sleep removal. And Sam Bam has even teched in an Ironclad Minotaur for even more anti-sleep. Zoolight, just like I've been saying for the past couple of weeks, it's just really good in the early game. A lot of the decks that can hang with it in the early game don't exist anymore. The control decks are all sleep-oriented, and Light is really good against sleep. Light is super strong right now. The play style is easy. You make big tempo plays. It's also really good against zombie death, which I think might be pretty prevalent this weekend, mainly because of Light's Levy. Usually it's really hard to deal with Cursed Obelisks. Light can just deal with it on curve while generating a 2/2, which is incredibly strong. So if you are playing Light and you're playing against zombie death, don't levy their Skeleton Heavies and Pyramid Wardens. Definitely levy their Cursed Obelisks. That is going to be really important for those matchups. Let's see. We got the Highborn Knight, which is warded, so it's good for anti-sleep. Great for controlling the early board with its front line protected and ward. Its mana cost is perfect because you play it right before you play Canonize, and Canonize is super strong. Let's see, we've got the Guild Enforcer in here. Just like last week, Light is really good at buffing Guild Enforcer, and buffing Guild Enforcer is really good. You can see Sandman even has 2 Field Nurses in here, so despite the fact that he goes with Summon Acolyte God Power, he can still heal up his creatures very successfully, not only making his board stronger, but also getting some card draw in with Cern, who is incredibly powerful. You might have noticed that this deck runs a Golden Saber, and I imagine less than 1% of the viewers actually own a Golden Saber. It's a very expensive Etherbots card. You definitely don't need this card to make the deck work. You can swap in a Cudgel if you want. If you don't own a Cudgel, you might want to think about picking one up. Cudgel is a really great light card. It's like a better version of Ritual Rod, essentially speaking, and light decks tend to want to run more than 2 1-mana relics. If you've got the Golden Saber, feel free to throw it in your deck so you can flex just like the Sandbam, but if you don't have it, don't worry, this card is very easily replaceable. And yeah, just like last week, Light is really good. It's not seeing a ton of play, but it's very strong right now. The playstyle is simple. If you've ever played Light before, you can jump right in. It'll be just like it was last time you played. And you're going to get a lot of wins very quickly with Light. Alright, so now that we've discussed that, let's jump into the next deck, which will be Deception. Okay, so now we are on to Deception. For the past couple of weeks, for the Deception guide, we've been showing off the Sleep archetypes, but Sleep Deception seems to have fallen out of favor. Why would you play Control Deception when you can play Control Death? They both do very similar things, but Board Wipe Death got 25 out of 25 for 2 different players and was just rampant all over the top 10. So sleepy control players are going to go with Board Wipe Death, not Sleep Deception, but don't worry. If you love Deception, there is a cool, hot new deck in the meta right now. This is Guild Order Deception. It is super fun. You do so many crazy cool combos. Let's just jump into it a bit. So you may have noticed from the curve that this deck is just jam-packed full of 3-mana creatures, or just 3-mana cards in general. 12 of your 30 cards are at 3 mana, and that is calculated. It's all because of Desert Mercenary. This is one of the strongest cards, if not the strongest card in your deck. It's a 3-mana 3/3. Its roar effect is all of your guild creatures. The way it words it is too confusing. All your guild creatures that cost 2 or 3 get their mana reduced to 1, which is really, really big. Obviously, 3-mana creatures are the ones that you really want to hit, and we have a lot of really great 3-mana guild creatures in the deck. Let's go through them real fast. We've got the Jinxblade Duelist. This card snowballs. It's really great with Orpheo's Distraction, which is the god power we're running. The Prison Escapee is really, really strong. It's similar to like a Curse Obelisk in the sense that this one card can just be your entire board state. It pairs really, really nicely. The Prison Escapee pairs really nicely with the Prisoner Exchange, which is a 1-mana spell. It removes order from each of your creatures, and then when your turn ends, it gives those creatures order +2. So you can guarantee activate your Prison Escapee, and then reorder him. So if you play your Prison Escapee with your Prisoner Exchange, you're setting yourself up for 4 escapees, and that's a lot of creatures for like 1 to 2 cards. Prisoner Exchange is also great with your Patient Pickpocket. Patient Pickpocket has very decent stats for a 1-mana card in 1/3. It's got Flank, which may or may not be relevant, but when he loses order, you get a copy of a card from your opponent's hand into your hand, which is not only good to generate you resources, which is important for a deck with such a low curve, but it also tells you what your opponent has going on. So you can play around their board clears, you can play around their creature buffs, because you know what's in their hand, and you can even use it against them. It's very fun. Let's see, more 3-mana guild creatures. We've got the Volt Vagabond, very similar to the Patient Pickpocket. Decent guild creature, gets you more resources, which is important because our curve is so low. Diligent Architect, also in that same boat. It delves you a structure. Pre-Divine Order, this card was mostly a meme, but with the inclusion of Divine Order, there are a whole bunch of really great structures, and they become even greater when you give them +2 health. So if you can get yourself like a Monolith of the Storm, that's crazy, and Archmemnos is crazy, but the craziest one is a two bonus health, the Hollow. The Hollow you run in your deck naturally. It's already one of the best cards in your deck. This was buffed a couple of weeks ago. It has backline and ward. It has skeleton heavy stats. It can't attack obviously because it has an ability, but its ability is super strong. You can give order +2, 3, or 4 to one of your friendly creatures, and whenever a creature loses order, the Hollow generates you a random guild creature for your hand. Now, you might be thinking, when am I going to pick +3 order, +4 order? Never. You only ever pick +2 order. It's important to remember that you can order the Hollow himself, since he can't attack. He doesn't mind having order anyway, and you just generate a ton of resources. One free guild creature turn is great, which you guarantee by having the Hollow, but if you have things like Prison Escapee or Patient Pickpocket on the board, then you really start filling your hand up with lots of guild creatures. It's also important to note that most guild creatures are fairly cheap, ranging between like 1 and 5 mana. Of course, there are some that cost 6 or more, but most of them are cheap. So when you play the Hollow in the early game, you know you're going to get a card that's at least playable. Like, you're not going to low roll and get a whole bunch of 9 drops off the Hollow. So that's always good to remember. Let's see, what else do we have going on over here? We've got Surprise Delivery, which is really cool since this is an aggressive deck. Dealing face damage is always nice, and this fills up your opponent's side of the board with 3 little barrels, which can stymie their board presence if you're playing against something like Nature. Limiting them to only 3 creatures is really strong. Let's see, you got the Lantern-Bound Fae, which was buffed a couple of weeks ago. It's got Order 3. After any creature you have loses order, this card gets pulled back into your hand, and his roar effect is deal 3 damage. So it's really easy to play Lantern-Bound Fae when you have like a Prison Escapee or a Patient Pickpocket on the board with 1 order, so you can play it, get the roar effect, end your turn, and have it bounce right back to your hand, so you can just keep dealing 3 damage to whatever you want every turn. It's very, very powerful. Let's jump into the neutral area. Got the Axwoman. That's self-explanatory. Axwoman gets trade. She's really good. Foreign Diplomat is a guild creature, so it can be reduced by a Desert Mercenary. It also has decent stats, gets you favor. You like having favor since, like I said before, our curve is very low. Generating extra resources is important. This deck is great at generating resources. Foreign Diplomat definitely helps. Iron-Tooth Goblin, also a guild creature, and relics are rampant in the meta right now. There's Necroceptors, there's Kopeshes, there's Jagstaffs, there's all the light relics. Iron-Tooth Goblin's really great, and it synergizes with the deck because of its Goblin tag. Not Goblin, sorry, it's Guild tag. Pyramid Warden, self-explanatory. We've discussed Desert Mercenary to excess. And the last card is Fermentary Instigator, the last of your Guild payoff cards. 4 mana, 3/4, so very decent stats, just like Portal Wrangler, with a roar effect of draw a card for each guild creature on the board, including your opponent's side of the board. And this deck has a ton of guild creatures. Let's just count them out real quick. So we've got 2, 4, sort of 1, but we'll keep it 4. 6, 8, 10, these 2 are 12, 14, 16, 18, including the Fermentary Instigators. So 17 guild creatures when you play the Fermentary Instigator. This thing's usually going to draw you more than 1 card, which is absolutely crazy. And as I've been saying over and over and over again, this deck needs more resources so you can keep spilling all your stuff and applying a ton of pressure. This deck is super fun, really cool, lots of great combos. And if you are thinking there's a couple cards in here that are too expensive, my buddy Copperpitch recently made a YouTube video of a very similar deck, but a budget format. I believe his deck cost like $40 USD altogether. So I'll put a link to that video in the description here, so you can check that out if you're missing some of the cards. But I definitely recommend this Guild Deception deck. It's really fun, really different. All the randomly generating stuff makes every game feel really fresh. This deck is super fun and super new. So, yeah, definitely a cool... Also, the win rate's been great so far. I've played like 12 games with it. I lost to only 1, and it was because I screwed up. And every game is super cool. Definitely recommend it. But that's enough talking about Guild Deception. Let's jump into the next... Okay, and now we are moving on to Magic. This is a Tempo Magic deck, same one that we featured in last week's video. I really like Tempo Magic for this current meta. It's a great aggressive deck, for like against the entire field, but it's particularly good against board wipe death as well as zombie death. It's great against board wipe death because you have lots of great ward creatures that they have a hard time dealing with, as well as just your curve is very cheap. So this is the type of deck that usually wins before 7 mana. Death has to get to 7 mana to win. Board wipe death, that is, has to get to 7 mana to win. And you have lots of ward stuff to fight against their sleep stuff to stall. You have direct damage so that you don't need to play creatures into their demos to deal, the final blow with your Worm Breath. You've got lots of card draw in your Palace's Wand as well as your Orpheos Playwright. Extra power to all of your spells with your Street Conjurer. Altogether, oh, and I guess we should talk about the zombie death matchup. The reason it's so good against zombie death is you have lots of great AoE. Tracking Bolt kills all zombies. Star Shard Bolt gets rid of Cursed Obelisk, which is really, really important. Crystal Rain can deal with big boards. That being said, Crystal Rain is definitely the card in the flex spot right now. If you are running into lots of spammy zoo decks, like Nature with Blade Flies and Falling Stars, I think it's called Falling Stars, the 5-mana spell that burns your biggest creature and buffs your whole board, makes 3 Badgers. If you're playing against a lot of decks like that, Crystal Rain will be great. But if you're playing against, also Light, Crystal Rain's very good against. But if you're finding that you're not playing against a whole bunch of spammy zoo decks, you can swap this out for either an Epiphany for more damage, maybe a Ratify for like direct removal, maybe some sort of relic removal like a Bronze Servant or an Iron Tooth Goblin, because relic removal is probably better against zombie death than Crystal Rain would be. But altogether, this deck is going to be really strong against 2 of the more prevalent decks in both death archetypes and zombie and board wipe death. And then when you're not playing against those decks, like when you're playing against nature or war, it's just good against the field. So Tempo Magic, definitely strong this week. If you'd like more information on Tempo Magic, feel free to watch some of last week's videos and the week before. We've spoken about Tempo Magic a whole bunch. It's been a great deck for the past couple of weeks, and it's going to remain a great deck because it's super strong against everyone, and it's one of the few decks that can actually hang against board wipe death. So that is enough of Magic. Let's jump into Nature. Okay, so now let's talk about Nature. We've got a nice mid-range Nature deck made by Caution Fun. Like I said in the beginning of this video, I'm not super bullish on War or Nature. That being said, this is a very nice looking mid-range Nature deck. Let's run through it real quick. As you can see, it's a classic mid-range curve. It's got cards pretty much across the whole spectrum, topping out at 6 mana. Caution's got the Chiron in here, which is really great against all the zombie decks that are floating around. Got the low-hanging fruit, which is just sort of a superior shield bearer. Now that shield bearer has been nerfed, it works really great with the Marshwalker, just like the classic buff Marshwalker meta. Still super strong. Black Jaguar, that's an obvious one. Canopy Barrage is obvious. Flame Blade, only 1 copy, but I guess seeing as that you have 2 copies of low-hanging fruit, you don't necessarily need a second Flame Blade. One weird thing to note is there's no Finian Fruit Bearer in this deck, which is a bit strange. Usually, I would include Finian Fruit Bearer in every nature deck, especially tempo ones. But that doesn't matter. There's a lot of great tempo tools in here. Got the Underbrush Borers. That's obvious in every nature deck because it's one of their better 2-drops. Crystal Stag is super strong. If you guys don't know, that card got buffed about a week ago. Now when you play Crystal Stag, if you play a Wild Hog on that same turn, you get the random nature card, whereas a few weeks ago, you'd have to wait until your following turn to get the effect off Crystal Stag. It's also an early game creature with Blessed, and like I've said in many of these videos, Blessed effects in the early game are really, really strong. If you're a tempo deck, you want to be the person controlling the Sanctum, and Blessed is going to help you do that. Lightning Strike gets rid of big creatures, that's obvious. We've got the Overgrown Rhino in here, which is pretty cool. No Mooncrest Cyclops, we're back to the old, reliable Overgrown Rhino. It's always a 4-mana 5/5. Who needs buffing? Avatar of Nature, that's obvious. We talk about him every week. He's just good. Big Moose, he's big. Falling Star for a big creature buff to capitalize on all the overstated nature creatures you've been playing during the game. You've got the Giant Pangolin. He's just a fantastic card. 6 damage is very threatening to your opponent. Has that big immediate impact with his Blitz effect, and 2 armor makes him hard to remove. Then there's the Sudden Bloom, which is a super strong card. Not only does it buff one of your creatures to, threaten your opponent's life total, but the Twin Strike and Overkill makes it so it's also effectively a big board clear. And looking at, Caution's list, Sudden Bloom is probably going to hit something like Overgrown Rhino, Brazen Moose, or a Giant Pangolin. All those creatures have a ton of attack, so the Overkill is definitely going to clear the entire board and be incredibly powerful and just be a consistent threat. Your opponent's going to need some sort of hard removal to deal with whatever gets Sudden Bloomed. And then the final card on the list is Watchtower of Agridor. This is a very strange inclusion. I have never seen someone use this card successfully, which is strange because it has a very powerful effect. 6 mana, 2/8, so stats are pretty awful. But it's got backline and ability. The ability is pick one, summon an Agridor Protector if you want to be defensive, summon Tane Treant if you need more value, or summon 3 Vibrant Fruits if you want to buff up your team. All in all, this card is really versatile. It does whatever you need it to do. Like I said, if you need to be defensive, it's got you. If you need value, it's got you. If you need creature buffs and board presence, it's got you. It also sort of demands an answer. So if you play your Watchtower of Agridor and it gets immediately removed, that's a bummer, but it probably means they won't be removing your Giant Pangolin or your Brazen Moose. I imagine that's the mind state that's behind the Watchtower of Agridor, and if it does stick, then you just go nuts playing Agridor Protectors and Vibrant Fruits all day. Yeah, so as far as mid-range nature decks are concerned, this one looks really good. It's got a very powerful early game. It transitions to a very powerful mid to late game. It's got excellent like comeback-ish cards with Lightning Strikes, Canopy Barrages, even Falling Star is a good comeback mechanic card. Falling Star, I guess we should talk about that a bit. It's super strong. It got buffed a couple of weeks ago. Before it did something completely ridiculous. It was stupid and worthless. Now you give your opponent's strongest creature burn +6, which will effectively kill any creature in 2 turns. You summon 3 Badgers with Confuse, and you give all of your creatures +1 strength. So those Badgers are automatically 2/2s. So this is sort of like a 5 mana Bladefly plus Sing Song Satyr plus single target Ragnarok type deal. So the fact that this card deals 3 things means that it's good. Cards that do lots of stuff are always good. This is a great creature buff. Great control tool, great board presence tool, super strong. This is definitely one of the win conditions of the deck, as well as the Sudden Bloom that we talked about in great detail. Yeah, if you like nature, which I know a lot of people do, this seems like a very strong deck. No Pyramid Wardens in it, so that's nice for new and free-to-play players, but that's enough talk about nature. Let's jump into war. Okay, and the last god to discuss is war. I've got a control-y deck as well as an aggressive deck for you. We're going to start with the control decks. I'm going to go through war fairly quickly. Like I said in the beginning of the video, I don't think that war or nature are particularly the best gods this week, but I know there are a lot of die-hard war fans, so I'm going to show you some war decks anyway. The reason this war deck in particular, this was made by Chronic. The reason I picked this control war deck is because it runs 2 copies of Soul Survivor, which was recently buffed. It used to be 7 mana, now it's 6. Its effect is give +5 strength to one of your creatures, then deal its strength as damage to all other creatures. So it's a creature buff plus AoE effect, and Chronic has definitely tailored this deck around Soul Survivor. You can tell because he has he has tons of leech effects, and if you Soul Survivor a leech creature, the damage that it deals to everything will be leech damage, so it'll definitely heal you to full. All in all, this functions just like all the other control-y war decks we've been talking about in the past. It uses tons of blitz creatures in Vanguard Axewoman, Tavern Brawlers. It's got the Ravenous Chimera, 2 Orcish Elites, lots of blitz creatures to control the board state. If the board does get out of hand, you've got your Carnage Sweep in combination with Magic Missile Launcher and Leviathan Hunter for a full-on board clear. There's no more Einar, so now we just got Herdicus, but that's fine. Herdicus is super strong. He's got Pseudo Blitz, it's Blitz but better, since he just deals his strength to whatever creature source you want, so he doesn't take any damage to his health. He's super strong. Let's see, Chronic's got 2 of these Tormentor Fiends in here, which gives things Leech, which is important for sustaining your health. I do think it's strange to have two Tormentor Fiends and no Grand Halls. In my opinion, Grand Hall just sort of seems like a better 4-mana version of Tormentor Fiend, but what do I know? I haven't played a ton of Control War, and this deck's been doing great. 55 games, 84-ish% win rate, so quite strong. He's got a Hector in here. Hector's self-explanatory. It has every keyword. It's completely broken when you play it. And as far as value generators are concerned, he's got the strength and numbers to fill his hand up with some buffed creatures. But in my opinion, Control War doesn't... It gets out-controlled by the other control decks. It's just not as good as Board Wipe Death or even Sleep Deception as far as board control is concerned. And let's jump into the aggro. This aggro deck was made by Sparta Jayik. I don't know how he's going for that. This Sparta guy, he made this aggressive war deck. I don't think that aggressive war is particularly great either. I think it's also outclassed by the other aggressive decks. I think Light outdoes war. I think Nature outdoes war. That new Guild Deception outdoes war. Magic outdoes war. Slayer War is still strong, but if you want to play aggro, I think Light or Deception or Magic is probably the move. But either way, this is a great Slayer War deck. The creator has played 28 games with an 85.7% win rate, and 50 people have played the deck in all with an 78% win rate. So the deck definitely wins. If you like playing Slayer War, it's going to perform well. I just don't think it's going to be performing as well as the other aggressive classes at the moment. But let's jump through the deck real fast. We've got the classics in your... you got Master Tactician, you've got all of your blitzy creatures, you've got the big creature buff and red fume serum. He's also got two Guild Enforcers in here. War can make really good use of Guild Enforcer with its buff cards. Buffing a Guild Enforcer with red fume serum is just as nuts as it was last week. Drawing Guild Enforcer off out of its misery, just as nuts as last week. Buffing it with Tartessian Improviser, just as nuts as last week. Deck is definitely still strong. It definitely got a little bit weaker with Guild Enforcer getting weaker, but also it doesn't need to deal with Guild Enforcers as much anymore, so it's a double-edged sword, as they say. If you want to play War, War is definitely fine, but if you are an aggressive player and you're willing to branch out into some other gods, I would definitely suggest Light, Nature, Magic, or Deception. But yeah, those are the War decks. Okay, so now it is conclusion time. We've talked about decks, we've thought about matchups, what deck should we play over this weekend ranked tournament, and in my opinion, this is the weekend of death. If you are a control player and you have the tools to build this Board Wipe Death deck, this is a no-brainer. Two different people had perfect records with it last week, none of the cards were nerfed. The rest of the top 10 was just littered with different Board Wipe Death decks. This deck is super strong. If you have the collection, if you can stomach the incredibly long games, this deck will definitely get you tons of wins this weekend. But if you don't have the cards or you just can't stomach the Board Wipe Death gameplay, there is Zombie Death. This deck is super strong. It's a great deck, and they just keep buffing it. Every balance patch, there's another buff. Like 2 weeks ago, we were blessed with the new and improved Cursed Obelisk, as well as the new secondary effect Necroceptor. Now we have Mark of Death, which is not the flashiest looking card, but it is incredibly powerful. Guaranteeing that your Nephru's Wills and your Nether Swarm Lords get to go off is super good. It also just makes it so if you don't draw your Cursed Obelisks and Necroceptors, you still have an option for mass zombie generation, which is super important. Zombie Death is really fun, really cool, keeps getting buffed, definitely recommend it. But if you don't like death, if you want to stick it to the death players, then I would say go with Zoolight. Zoolight is really good at dealing with death. Lots of anti-sleep stuff to deal with the board wipes. Light's Levy to deal with Cursed Obelisk. You can slot in Relic Removal to deal with Necroceptors. Light's just solid against the whole board. Magic is similar. Should be pretty good against both the death archetypes, as well as, the rest of the field. So Death, Light, and Magic are definitely the gods that I am looking towards. But like I said just a few minutes ago, I think this is the weekend of death. Board wipe death or zombie death. Pick your archetype. Both these are really, really great. Hey, you! Did you know that subscribing to the TST YouTube channel will increase your win rate by 6.9%? So what are you waiting for? Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications. And while you're at it, equip Scythe of the Harvest and attack the like button directly in the face. Bye-bye!